On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Michelle McHargue. She is a partner at Costa Noa Ventures. We're going to be talking about community building and the pressure founders are under for hiring. I think a lot of times when we look at founders, they're obviously wearing multiple hats. They're focused on different things, and hiring is a challenge for them. We're going to be talking to Michelle about community building and how that helps her portfolio companies long term to make those hires. Michelle, thanks for being on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Amir. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. All right. Tell us a little bit about what you guys do over there. And before we dive in, we'd like to hear that.
Yeah, so at Costa Noa, we are an early stage venture fund. We focus on seed to Series A. We do follow-ons across the alphabets with our companies, but our primary focus is in seed and Series A. Things that we deploy capital towards is things in the fintech, security. We're doing some things in defense, data and infrastructure, and vertical SaaS. But so all enterprise B2B SaaS is what gets this team excited.
Cool. I like it. I mean, those are areas that are high demand, complex, challenging. Obviously, when we're talking about those kind of startups, they're all looking for top talent. And I guess that's really something when you work with startups, you come to realize that there's a definitive subjective bar of what top talent is for each org. It's rare that everyone agrees. And maybe let's start off there. Let's talk about top talent and that subjectivity and the pressure that it puts on not only just the hiring managers, but the TA side as well.
Yeah. When you're hiring or recruiting for early stage companies, you're looking for your foundational team, really, right? So especially at seed and Series A, you're bringing in your 2 to 3, 5, 10 engineers, and so is everybody else around us. And so it's just super competitive, which makes it really hard. I was just talking to our talent team here at Costa Noa, and it's a volumes game. And not only is it a volumes game to just try to find great people, there's only so many of them. You could boil the ocean 10 times over and still come up with the same pool for a lot of different parameters. I know we'll dive into that, but just the sector that people are interested in, the compensation people are demanding, the experience, and you name it. The audience will know what I'm talking about. This is literally just the thing we have to deal with when we're trying to recruit for great, in this case, engineering talent, and any other talent, as a matter of fact. But it's really for engineering usually.
That makes sense. And I think, what has become very obvious to me is a lot of times startups, especially earlier the stage, they will wait for the right candidate. They realize the importance. They will wait. They will be patient. They won't just hire to hire. I think at larger companies, at enterprise, bigger enterprises, sometimes you see companies that are like, I just need this resource. I'll pull the trigger on close enough. I guess when it comes to trying to find as close to the ideal, talk to us a little bit about that impact, right? So the hiring team obviously has an open headcount, but also when the open headcount's 10 months old, you start questioning. You question a lot. So, I mean, maybe give us some insight into that.
When you're a company that's early, we're going to probably use that a ton, right? A startup and a company that's under resourced just to begin with, you are trying to find the one, because the impact that they're going to make really, really matters. There is no hiding under the table like you would be if you were at a bigger company, because you are 100 out of how many engineers, right? Versus at a smaller company, you're one of a handful, and everyone needs to work, and engines need to be on all cylinders to be able to do this. So to be able to compromise is really tough for our companies, to just say, hey, you know what, you're good for right now, and we'll deal with it later, but I just need you to help us with this coding situation so we can get products out. So that's where you'll probably see companies just taking a little bit longer, outside of, again, the competitiveness of the market. Is we have to be very thoughtful on top of, is this person going to be a great culture addition to the team? Do they have the appetite to do the work that we need to do? It could be a grind, right? People are trying to get things out the door with minimal people, a workforce around you to be able to do this. So you have to find someone who has the DNA and maybe be a little cuckoo for Cocoa Pops to want to be a part of this amazing kind of world of the startups.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think, when we were talking about this and we were talking about community, it becomes challenging because there are specific skill sets specific companies are looking for. And I think if you're in the talent side, that also is transforming as the company is growing. So the notion of curating a community also might be very tied into the phase and state of the company. I guess when you think about curating, communities and trying to stay in touch with talent for particular types of talent, how do you view the ability to curate? Again, in the context that startups are growing and evolving and they're not staying static, so that what we build now for a community might not be as relevant, a year out.
I mean, that's a great question. I think, for talent cultivating, it is a long game, right? So when your companies are looking for people at all different types of levels, and I think, in this situation of our earlier companies, we're looking for mostly ICs to come in, again, to be the foundational team to help them build. And for us, we really take pride in the curation of a lot of different things that we do. In particular for us, and I'm super passionate about it, it's what the team cares about, is building, in this case, women in tech, right? And I think there's often times where that community will come that we've curated. They'll say, Michelle, this is the most amazing group to be a part of because I want to see people like myself at my startup, because usually they're probably the only one, if not maybe two. So to build a community like this, and they're not necessarily in our portfolio, they're just people that meet along the way through events and networking and, cold emails from LinkedIn, which I do all the time. And like, hey, I have nothing for you, but I just want to be a part of your orbit, right? And be able to build them into our community is just to foster that relationship so that one day, if a company is looking to hire and they have the skill sets and that they're looking for, that I can hopefully try to match that up. So again, it's a long game for curation of a community. It's really hard because everyone is trying to do something like that. So you have to make it a meaningful and impactful and you're listening to what people are asking of this. I'm not trying to sell a job usually I say usually because at the end of the day, that's hopefully one day they come to our portfolio company, but our job is truly to build a community where people can come together and maybe one day come to my portfolio company.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's great insights. I think, when we talk about curated communities and curated talent, it is the long game, which is fascinating because on the perm side, people end up taking jobs for years at a time, especially at startups. If they want to see through the vesting cycle, they're going to be there maybe 3-4 years. And, I think that long game is something talent always doesn't invest in because we're kind of reactive. A role opened up a day from now, we need to fill it. It's not something we can, farm and hope to find. When you look at that community, and obviously you're trying to bring people in, do you focus on that niche aspect? Because you mentioned women in tech, which is more niche. But when you start thinking about the types of talent that certain startups want, is it a question of, listen, I am just trying to bring awareness to the portfolio that these are the companies we have, and obviously at different stages, our different companies might value that, or do you try to get really niche and understand that a specific group of people will maybe congregate if there's a specific topic or mission behind it?
It's probably a little bit of both, right? I think, in some regard, our companies, like I mentioned, some of the sectors that we're focused on, defense, that's a niche, right? Like, I mean, if that's, so you want to concentrate, able to build a community that could service and find great talent to go support that type of companies. But for us, I think it's more of really just building that company, and the folks that are in these events that we do come from all across sectors. I mean, they could even be in consumer. We're heavily focused on enterprise, B2B, and SaaS, right? So I just want to get to know you because not only you may not be a fit for my company, but someone in your network will. And talent is all about network. And so when you're building out, again, just a community of just wonderful people, they're from all over the place. And that goes a little bit to the diversity of the question, right? This just touches it a little bit, and how I view it is I want to be talking to a lot of different people because everybody brings a lot of different great skill sets and experience and magic to something that you may have not known about because you're just so focused on a particular thing. So again, opening this up for us is what we do. It's not, again, ideal to be in the sectors, but our doors are open for everything, just because it's a networking.
I guess talk about the founders. The founder mindset. Obviously, they're driven to find the right person. I mean, we just you explained that. We talked about that, and within that context of trying to find the right person, do they get focused on particular skills? I guess that's a question. Maybe I'll just leave it at that. And the question, just to kind of clarify, because I was going to extend it, but I think I'll leave that as a follow up. Do founders get fixated on particular skill sets when they're looking to hire?
I would say yes, sometimes, right? It goes back to, because there's not many in that company, they have to be maniacal a little bit about it, right? So you go do the thing, which is run the process and go try to find the thing that they're looking for. And then also infuse a couple of the things that are outside the bullseye to say, like, hey, this is the potential, right, of outside of your bullseye that may not fit the thing that you are like so laser focused on. And then being that partner to your founders or the hiring team to let them know that you've been too focused, like unfocus yourself a little bit. Like, let's look at the broader thing, right? And I think I think a lot of founders, it's not necessarily just our founders, but I'll say ours, are open to that. But again, it's going to start from the beginning with maniacal focus, because they have to, because there's, and then being a player coach to help them look at and open up the aperture a little bit to potential.
Yeah. And I guess that kind of leads into, I mean, obviously the one thing that might happen when we're talking about curated communities, you are bringing in people of all kinds, right? It's not necessarily a particular type of person. You're brand exercise, right? Trying to bring people into the community. As you mentioned, sometime down the road, maybe they are a good fit for one of your portfolio companies. When you go to a founder or they're working through the community and they're trying to understand who's available, the type of candidates that might be within that pool, is there an understanding that the curated community, there's some openness to looking at those candidates that might not come from potentially walks of life or backgrounds that they would just beeline for if they're on LinkedIn doing some recruiting themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. I know they understand how competitive things are. And I think the nature of at least I'll speak for myself, for my relationships with my founders, is that one, I'll advise from a place of just experience. I've been doing this a long time, right? I have seen patterns. If we stick to this pattern, it may not go so well this way, but if we just open it up a little bit, because I've seen it go well at ABC, you should try to consider it. And, oftentimes there will be, the percentage is very high. They're like, you know what, you're right. Let me talk to this person and go see, like, something I may not be able to kind of see just based on paper. And when you're viewing things on paper, which we all start off looking at things on paper, or in this case, LinkedIn, I'm old school because I've been around and experienced. So when you're looking online at someone's experience, mostly on LinkedIn, usually, I mean, that's your first thing. So they're all going to just look at that. So you're immediately biased by it because this person has done this. But if you had the conversation, you'll pick up a little bit more. So that's the thing you want to encourage. And I think for my team, that's what we're encouraging our founders to do, is like, hey, it may not read this, but just trust me. Just talk to them, because they've done something pretty special at XYZ. It's just, you're just not reading it.
That's actually really good insight. And I guess when you think about the actual interview process itself, right? And I think sometimes the process is almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, because it's designed for certain type of people to really excel, right? I think it's something we've seen. When you are working with founders, is there a notion, because I know this from what I've seen, it's not an easy thing to shift, but that interview process, is there flexibility so that it could be a broader measure versus sometimes it's really dialed in for, especially if they have some type of elite code or something like that, and there were specific people excel at that. Is that something that a founder listens to? Or again, going back to what you mentioned, they really need what they need. It really doesn't matter if it doesn't fit other people.
I'm going to say it's probably split. You'll have founders or hiring managers that have high conviction around, like, I know what I'm looking for, and I know what I need, and I hear you, I appreciate it, but no, thank you. And that's okay. At the end of the day, this is their company, right? You're just there. I'm here as a sounding board to just infuse again my experience. And sometimes it's gone where it's like, I'm good, Michelle. Like, cool answer, but or advice, I'm good. And then you have the others where they've done it, but they're always open to hearing different approaches on it, right? Because either that could be the case that they've been trying to find somebody for so long and it's just taken quite a bit, and maybe what they're doing isn't working. So they're just more apt to, to again absorb the advice that you're giving. So it's split. I'm not going to say every one of them is, we're walking down the golden road of hiring and we're all good. It's a split.
When do founders start listening to advice for the hiring process? Is there a tipping point where they're like, hey, this is taking too long, or this is inefficient? Is there some kind of, I guess, markers to kind of, have it be a cue that they're going to come and maybe ask for some guidance or maybe how to optimize?
That's a great question, because I'm literally going through the Rolodex of my brain right now of just where I've seen success. I think part of it is when you show somewhat a result. So if I'm going to present you a couple of candidates that, again, you could be looking for a marketing leader, and the founder may have never really interviewed for a marketing leader ever before. And I'm like, hey, listen, I have these two amazing people. You don't need to hire them, but you should talk to them to guide you. And they walk away from that conversation saying, okay, that was an amazing conversation. You get a little bit of credit. You get you get some bonus points that, okay, Michelle actually knows what she's talking about and maybe knows what I need, right? So you get a little bonus points from that perspective. And again, you're using examples of things you've done with the portfolio that you share with your founders. Again, these are early stage companies that either have not done this before or haven't done it often enough that they're all willing to take the advice, right? Of like, they all want to be good. They all want to be killers in what they do. And they're going to take the advice. And our job is just, to share what we've known because we've seen it. And it's up to them to really kind of decipher which one is going to work for them. Because at the end of the day, like I said, this is their companies and they're going to have to figure out what works best for them. We just want the best for them. And we'll give them as much guidance as their ears can take.
That's fair. I think, as you mentioned, it's their company. And I think sometimes from the outside in, it's easy. I think everyone probably can relate to this. From the outside in, everything looks easy. Well, you should listen to this. This is what you should do. And then when it's you, the second thoughts come in. Is this the right thing? And I think especially, having a mandate to deliver against, some amount of funding. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of pressure. And that pressure, maybe we could talk about that, because I think sometimes we don't talk about it enough, is from a talent perspective, we want the roles filled because that's what we do. From the pressure of getting that person in, that always doesn't fit with what we want as a timeline, doesn't fit as neatly. When you look at some of that pressure and some of how you see founders operate, because you see it, again, you have the ability to see this across different kinds of companies, different types of founders, that pressure for hiring on them, how does it look from the inside out?
It's tough. I mean, you've said it, like, that's just their one mandate is to just hire, on top of like the customer calls, your little team that you're trying to manage, on top of your investors. There's so much going on. And my heart goes out to a lot of founders because it's tough. It is a very tough job, and there's a lot on the stake for them and their companies and the people that work for them, right? And it's not easy. And talent is one of those things where when I see this often, and when I was talking to just, again, some of my peers around that you've talked to in the past, is hiring is so important, but it's also the one that they can't focus on all the time, right? Because it's just, there's so many competing things that they need to do. And you're just, as a recruiter, you're like, hey, what about that candidate I sent you? They are A+. Like, have you looked at it? When are you be scheduled? And they're like, oh, Michelle, I haven't done it yet. And you're like, why? Right? Because they need this person. They know they need this person. But time is the enemy. So if anybody wants to find more time, and we can invest in it, I think we'd be retired by now. But time is the killer, and obviously they need more people. So that's the hard part.
Yeah, it's interesting is that obviously early on, and this from the perspective of the founder, I have them on my other podcast where it talks about, the engineering community. A lot of times it's about delegation. Early on, everything is really tight. Their imprint is on everything, right? So that is part of what they feel they need to do. As they grow, they hire, they put people in trusted positions, they delegate. When it comes to the hiring piece, obviously they could do similar, but obviously we just talked about it as well. They don't, because they want that tight control. When do founders typically see that tipping point to delegate? Is there some markers or signs where it's like, hey, listen, they're open to delegating, or I need to kind of suggest, listen, you should hire a head of talent or somebody to come in to actually do some of this lifting, because there's going to be some value for you to focus on other activities?
Yeah, I mean, that is a great call out, because that happens all throughout our early stage companies, right? Because not only are they the CEO and founder, they're actually the marketing, the sales, the finance. They're also their office manager. They're doing a plethora of job responsibilities. And I think at some point, this is where we are able to come in and say, well, hey, Amir, it looks like, this low hanging fruit of responsibilities that are just as important as your high fruit. It would be good maybe that you get, I don't know, a chief of staff, an EA, or to kind of offload those things, because there are so many other things for you to go focus on. Let me show you a couple people and what that looks like, or let me connect you with another founder when they brought in their person and what a game changer that was. So those are often conversations that you have. And again, it's being a trusted resource, which also takes time, because when you're funding somebody, they don't know who you are from Jill. You know what I mean? So you're building this rapport with them, and they know that you're there to make sure their interests are what we're thinking about. So I think it's just mapping everybody and getting everybody together and showing, again, data. A lot of our founders are data oriented. So you're just showing like case studies usually of like what's worked, what hasn't worked. And this is where I see it come in, and they're absorbing, listening, and hey, I'll try it out. And usually it works out.
I love it. I mean, as you mentioned, some of the experience to play, but obviously they have to go through a little bit of trial and tribulation themselves. Obviously, that's how most people learn. I know some people are really good listeners day one. I think a lot of people, they have to go fail and then go seek advice. And I think sometimes, as you just alluded to, we're like, we have done this a couple of times. It'd be easier to learn, but I don't think people operate that way, do they? I mean, I think this is part of just the growth and maturation to kind of stumble a little bit on your own.
You have to. It's almost, I mean, I have kids. So you kind of just, sometimes you want to like, oh, let me get in front of them so they don't fall, right? And there's oftentimes when I'm listening to founders and they're like, oh, I got to do this all because I can't delegate it, or I know this. And you're just like, that's going to change. It does, because you evolve, the company evolves, and you can't do that thing that you're doing now, because you're going to have to grow and evolve. Your company's scaling. And as you know, things change as you scale, and you as a leader have to scale with it. So if you're stuck here, we're in trouble. But if you're kind of moving along, hallelujah, right? But you have to just, again, to the point of it's their company, you have to watch them do it, and you just hope they evolve. And sometimes you may have to intervene by like, hey, I saw this thing that you did. Can I just give you a little bit of advice? And sometimes, for the most part, they're like, yeah, well, what did I do? Because they want to learn too, right? Or in some cases, there are some that are like, I'm good. And that's okay too.
Absolutely. I love that. Michelle, I know you got to get back to the day job. I appreciate you being on. Obviously, can't exhaust the topic, and we might spur some more questions than answers, and that's a good thing. But if somebody does want to reach out to you to continue the conversation, ask you about something you mentioned on the episode, what's a good way of connecting with you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is fantastic, unless you have some really good telepathy, but LinkedIn is great.
All right. We'll definitely put your LinkedIn handle in the show notes so people can connect with you if they want. Again, thank you for being on. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me. I had a great time.
Absolutely. All right. That's it for the episode. Be back again, different guest, different topic. Until then, two things. One, I think talking about community building and the pressure the founders are under to hire, I think we don't talk about it enough. I think both are actually really integral to the long-term growth of startups. I think Michelle had some great insights, examples of how it's successful and how she's actually working with founders to kind of move the needle and help actually solve some of these challenges that are showing up constantly on the founder's radar. So please share this with somebody else who might enjoy it. I appreciate that. Also, like, subscribe, comment. Let me know how the podcast is going for you. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.